And welcome to the No Something Required podcast, a podcast where we talk about nothing. And you do not have a trio of hosts today. It's a duo, minus one Audrey, never
Rip.
Ember. And so your two hosts today will be Romina with the good hair and your dark lord of the interwebs, Roberto Blake. So welcome to today's episode.
Hey.
Yeah, so today's topic is interesting. Today, we're going to be talking about the fact that the government has said that UFOs are not man-made and that the threat level is ever increasing. So we've talked about this on the podcast before. Like Congress admits UFOs are not man-made, says threats increasingly exponential. So like the government has been slowly leaking out and declassifying stuff around UFOs for quite a while, Romina. We've talked how many episodes have we done? This episode 125. How many episodes have we done specifically about UFOs?
You know what? I feel like I need to go back and do an accurate count and tweet about this.
You're going to guess.
If I was going to guess, at least 10?
Yeah.
For a podcast that is not about that at all overall. I think we talk about it more than we should.
It's the most interesting thing we could probably talk about. And but besides, you and I are both really into it.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's most interesting about this. So this came out like a couple days ago. This is recent development. As we all know, there was a huge document that came out last year. And there's been a bunch of talk and a lot of releasing of classified videos and photographs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But what makes this interesting is that, well, it's a couple things. Number one is that they being the government is making the U.S. government is making the distinction between UFOs that are man-made or UFOs that are not man-made, right? So that's like the big ticket item there, because it really starts to hone in on classifying what these objects are. So another interesting development is that the name is internally the government refers to UFOs as UAPs.
Yes.
Which are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Yes.
They are reclassifying those, and they're now going to be called unidentified aerospace undersea phenomena.
So that's an interesting
development.
Yes. So that suggests that there's more incidents that we don't know about that also include undersea activity, which is really interesting if you consider what the ramifications of that imply. The fact that there's been stuff going on that we may have heard less about. Not to mention there's things we've heard about before from submarines with radar, because when we hear about a lot of stuff, when we hear about the radar and the untracked stuff, a lot of it is radar from the airplanes, air traffic control, but it also has been historically from submarines as well. And there were a lot of interesting UFO phenomenon even during World War II that's so rarely talked about. It's so rarely talked about how much of that also happened during World War II. And the thing that makes that interesting is because that's when we started messing with nuclear power and atomic power. And that would be of great interest, if you really think about it, to some type of either extraterrestrial species, interdimensional species of like, okay, the apes are messing with fusion now, so it's like I got to connection to them. It's like, what do we do? So like that's how. I mean, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. So something in this article I read from Motherboard said that the new budget for America's intelligence services directs the Pentagon to focus its UFO investigation on those objects that it can't identify, which suggests that there are objects that it can. And then in terms of objects that it can, that also suggests some potential admittance to previously, because you and I had speculated that before, that some things may truly be phenomenon. Some things may have been the government doing things and wanting to use the phenomenon as a cover. Makes perfect sense. Could even be rogue agents. It doesn't have to necessarily be sanctioned by the government. That there's entities that could even be foreign entities that may have been abducting persons, doing human experimentation, human trafficking, any number of things under the guise of paranormal activity. It's a very good cover to discredit abductees and people who've been subject to any type of experimentation or any type of torture or anything of that nature, or any clandestine operation you want to do. It discredits witnesses. So it's actually a reasonable argument to make that some of it may have been engineered. And that's why the distinction between, in my mind, there's a lot to say for the distinction between man-made UFOs, man-made aerial phenomenon versus non-man-made.
Yeah, I think absolutely. There's also in one of the classifications that they have is the UAPs that they find that might be man-made, but they're unclassified currently, right? So there's going to be like different tiers of UFOs. It's not just going to be the good old flying saucer like UFO. Hey, we don't know what this thing is in the sky. Now it's like, okay, we're getting a lot more specific. And with that, there's more budget that's going into it.
Oh, yeah. The budget thing is super interesting.
It's interesting because even if you aren't like into any of this and you find this to be incredibly stupid,
the government allocating taxpayer money to it.
Exactly. And that's kind of like, I mean, that's I could find like a lot of people having problems with that, right? Because it's like their money's going somewhere that they don't want it to go. But I mean, currently my money's going to a lot of places that I don't want it to go.
What I think is like, okay, you can take this one two ways. If you're a skeptic, then it gives more credence to what I'm saying about clandestine operations, because now you have a very lucrative budget for clandestine operations, and you can always wave your hands and said, yeah, we went and throw this at the UFO stuff, and everyone will just go, oh, that's stupid. But then all of a sudden you have this budget for whatever you want to or need to fund some black bag clandestine operations, and you can just blame it on the UFO budget. You can do whatever you want with that money. Who's gonna know? I mean, that's what I would do. So that's yeah, I said it. That's what I would do. Is like, if you want to, like, if you wanted to be able to siphon money and you wanted to have a budget to siphon money, this is the most absurd thing you could put as a line item in the budget. You could use all these declassifications as a smokescreen if you wanted to. And then you could say, great, now I have this budget for my off-book covert ops organization and everything like that. You could run like B613 in Scandal, Section 1 in Nikita, Division, all this stuff. You could that's how you would do it. You would be able to have this is a legitimately allocated budget, and okay, and you could say whatever you want about where it went, but it's very hard to prove that when you're throwing it. And no one also really wants to be the person who said, yeah, I'm auditing the UFO budget. No one, who wants that on their resume? And then if something happens to you auditing the UFO budget, all anyone's gonna be like, it's like, oh, well, they're covering up the UFOs. Yeah. So it becomes this absurd thing. So you could get away with a lot under the guise of absurdity. Under the guise of absurdity, if you want to get away with anything, you realize how you can get away with the most. Be the class clown. Be the class clown. Be a joke. Be a comedian. And you can get away with a lot of things under the guise of no one thinking you're competent.
Yeah, just look at Logan Paul.
Right. Be future president Logan Paul. My president. I'm voting for Logan. If we're gonna reduce our politics to spectacle and bombastic characters, you know what? Screw it. I'll vote for a Viner.
Why not? Why not? I mean, they'd be a heck of an actor.
I mean, if you're gonna go ahead and give a performance and everything like that, Logan, you can't take away from him. He's entertaining and he's a great performer, tremendously gifted athlete. You know what? It's like,
and they're used to being in front of the cameras.
Used to be in front of the cameras. Great things in the WWE's charismatic. Look at that hairline. You know what? That's a president. hairline. You know what? He's already got my vote. It's like, I'll write it in now. He's already got my vote. I'm voting for Logan.
Yeah.
Voting for Logan Paul for every election from now on. That's how it is.
I wonder how would
I'm going to manifest Logan Paul into the presidency of the United States. And it's like, and yeah,
this is like The Secret.
I'm going to
you're gonna write it.
I'm going to manifest Logan Paul into the presidency of the United States of America. And this is, you can consider this one of, you can consider this a troll, or you can consider it your punishment, America, for flirting with Armageddon.
Now, question: How do you think Logan Paul will react if we make contact with extraterrestrials?
He's gonna want to vlog it. He's gonna vlog it. He'll bring them onto Impulsive. He'll bring a representative onto Impulsive. Well, it wouldn't be that bad. Logan Paul would not even be close to any of the worst presidents we've ever had. Come on, man.
All right. Will in the chat says that they'll have to move or choose death if Logan Paul.
Come on,
it's not that
bad. It's not gonna be that bad.
I think we've had worse.
We've had worse. We have worse now. So the I said it. So yeah, I am voting for Logan Paul. I will fundraise. I will let's go.
It would be interesting to have somebody in the government, in the White House, who is a vlogger, who is a documenter. Someone who's documented.
All his skeletons are already out there, so it's like great. It's like his skeletons are already out there, and I think he cares too much about clout to be actually vulnerable to true corruption. I think he'd rather like make exposed videos on people who are corrupt in Washington than actually be part of the corruption. I think he'd just appreciate the clout and the admiration and the love and the ratings from the American people. So I'd rather just let's go. Let's go. It's like, Can
you imagine like just a vlog is just like my day at the UN?
Yeah. By the way, in the worst case scenario, it's so bad that in the chaos, I ascend to the emperorship. In the chaos, I take control and become emperor. It's like, so it's all part of a grand plan, right? So it's like, hey, thing is, maybe President Paul works out. I'm rooting for him, but if all else fails, a Sith Lord will rise to the occasion.
Unless the aliens come.
Unless the aliens come, in which case I'm changing teams. Telling all
right.
teams, Team Predator. Predator.
That's if the aliens come and we know about it.
Yeah, I mean, assuming they're not here.
Right. Which by what the Pentagon has released has me pointing to.
For all intents and purposes, like you got a couple of scenarios. Like, how do we know that our current path doesn't lead to Skynet as it is, right? I think our current path, very easily, you could already argue that, Skynet's victory is assured at this point, right?
We're already on the roadmap.
So the alien intelligentsia could either be aligned with Skynet could be aligned with and serving them, or vice versa. Or they could be trying to counter Skynet, or we could be caught between them and everything. Like, who knows at this point, right? And again, I'm having fun with this, but you could make an argument for it. It's not the most absurd thing in the world ever if you start looking at, because think about it. The reality that we've been going through the last few years, it looks like the script out of a bad television series. So everything's on the table.
Idiocracy, but the TV show.
Yeah, it's Idiocracy, the series, and we're in like season 6 of this nonsense. And so, I mean, it's like, so the thing is, at this point, nothing would surprise me anymore. And I can't rule it out. I can't say, oh no, that's ridiculous. That of all the things that would never happen and everything, because every season has jumped the shark. Every season has jumped the shark. So I'm just like, at this point, I give up. I give up. I'm like, you know what? This is bad comedy.
MJ in the chat is agreeing.
Yeah, look, Skynet. If I'm Skynet, think about it. Right now, if I'm Skynet, we have TikTok and all these other things harvesting all our data and all of our attention and monetizing us. And then that monetization is building the infrastructure for the machines. It's building the infrastructure for the machines. We're training the machine brains right now to simulate humans, to be smarter. Their AI influencers are now infiltrating. These are the first level of infiltrators for the Terminators are not going to be like wearing rubber faces and looking like us. It's going to be these virtual influencers. It's going to be the metaverse. It's going to be virtual influencers. It's going to be VTubers. It's going to be the metaverse. These are the original Gen 1 infiltrators for the Terminators.
How long until we have a V president?
Who says we don't? But
well, they should work on their AI.
See, that would explain a lot, right? But no, I don't think we do. But a V president. So, do you oppose being governed as a country by an algorithm?
Depends on who's behind the algorithm.
Let's just say the algorithm is built off of, I'll put you, not who's behind it. Let's say it's Google Rank Brain AI, and let's say there's nobody behind the curtain. Let's just say it's Google Rank Brain AI to the extent that it's already been trained and conditioned. Do you think that Google's Rank Brain AI, the Google Brain, we'll just call it Google Brain. Do you think that Google Brain can properly govern the United States of America at its current levels?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Will is saying in the chat. It depends on the goal of the algorithm.
Let's say that the parameters, well, the thing is an algorithm can respond and artificial intelligence depends on parameters. So if the parameter is to govern in such a way as to provide the most value for the most citizens, we give those parameters to say, here are all current policy positions. Here is all current legislation that is active. Choose and govern on the legislation and come to legislative conclusions based on what does the most good for the most citizens of the United States of America based on your current census data that we've given you, your current legislation options that we've given you, the current positions politically in the nation, and come to the most reasonable conclusion of all proposals of legislation currently active. Like, so you would have all the current legislative proposals that right now sitting politicians, you could have them all submit their bills and their proposals. You could have it vote yes or no on these propositions. You can have it also pick between legislative options for different positions. And you could let Google Rank Brain AI look at that and say, given the census data that you have of the makeup of Americans, choose a conclusion that is the best for the most people, and in this nation. So if you give it those options to pick from and you gave it the census data, do you feel that Google Rank Brain AI left to its own devices with no additional human input could come to a proper thesis of governing?
Yes.
Given my
yes, because
specific parameters.
Because at that point it comes down to math.
Exactly.
And I feel that math is not as easily argued.
Do you feel like governing by census, by census data, not consensus, but by governing by the data dictated of the makeup of the nation based on the census data, do you think that that thesis of government is an appropriate way? I know that it could lack some nuance, but generally speaking, for most legislative options, do you think that that would be an appropriate way to govern?
Yes.
Yeah, because we can tell it, hey, here's what a human is. Here's all the data we have on what presents positive outcomes. Because what are positive outcomes for humans? We can give a robot, here's what positive outcomes look like for humans, right? Here are the humans that make up the United States of America. Here are what make certain subsections of humans based on their own inputs that came from data of their own behavior. Here's what makes most subsections, sub-data groups of humans happy. with all of this at your disposal, come to a conclusion to govern for the well-being, because here's what makes people happy, but here's what also produces the best outcomes. Here's what produces the best outcomes. And here's rating scale for good outcomes. You could put that in, and that's objectively measurable, verifiable. It's like, it's not that subjective. And even if you want some subjectivity, it comes down to, okay, well, among these subcategories of groups of humans, here are the things that produce the best outcomes in their subcategory, but here's also how they feel about their subcategories. Come to a conclusion based on census data. And if you give it those parameters, in the same way that if you gave it the parameters for give me the best workout program to get my desired results, give me the best diet to get my desired results, give me the best training and course schedule to get me my desired outcoming career, you can get to those conclusions. So do you feel that, if given what I'm stating, do you think that by AI is that bad if we use Google Brain to govern? Do you think it's that bad? I know there'll be some people in subcategories of people that'd be unhappy, but we already have that. We already have a lot of people who are unhappy.
Right. I think that I feel that an AI could do a much better job at figuring out how to manage large amounts of data, which is essentially what the government is. I mean, essentially what a country is large amounts of data. Be able to take large amounts of data and run it efficiently.
Don't you think that it has enough data don't you think that by serving the 2 billion users on YouTube and having their inputs, users, despite what creators complain about, user satisfaction on YouTube is amazing considering a 2 billion plus monthly user sample size. User satisfaction on YouTube is at an all-time high. So and that's 2 billion people. Google services over 3 billion, bordering on 4 billion users every single month and mostly every single day. Do you think that Google Brain do you think it uses and parses enough data that if you took it down to the 368 million people in America, don't you think it's more than capable? Don't you think it's overqualified?
Let me ask you this. Are you for RoboCop?
RoboCop, no. Robo Emperor, yes.
All right. So why not RoboCop? What do you got against RoboCop?
Large populations at scale, those decisions, the impact of those decisions at scale can be good because we've done it with less efficiency. We've done it with less efficient, less nuance, less intelligence. We've had less intelligent beings and less sophisticated mechanisms for doing that, and we managed to do that to some extent effectively. However, when you put AIs and algorithms down to individual situations that require reading temperament and nuance, because here's the thing, to come to a policy conclusion doesn't require to understand the temperament of 365 million people. And by the way, our current leaders can't parse for the temperament and difference in temperament of 365. So it doesn't matter because it's not an emotional decision anyway. It's not an emotional decision. However, I think that in situations, especially tense situations, being able to read a room is a human thing. Being able to read a room, being able to nuance a situation. We already have a problem when you have officers that don't have the appropriate training and empathy. And yes, some of the problem is their emotional responses. But sometimes it's the lack of empathy too, and the lack of compassion, and also the lack of the ability to accurately read a situation. I do not think that RoboCop is the answer, but do I think that Cop AI Assist? Do I think that Cop AI Assist is good? Do I think augmented reality cop? Yes, I do think augmented reality cop, meaning if you have a visor that gives you readouts of people's vitals, allows you like the Predator to scan in spectrum and infrared to know, oh, they're not armed. Oh crap, someone is pregnant. Oh crap, someone's experiencing emotional distress. Oh, I have maybe some accurate facial recognition, and it does say, hey, confirmation of identity is not 100%. It's only this percentage. Alternative identities and so on and so forth. If you consider not making people overly reliant on AI, but the fact that they could read their AI scope and say, it might slow them down enough to say, okay, let me take a beat because let me scan first. Oh, I take a beat. So scanning first also means cops are not entering into situations blind, which means they're not having to be as tense and emotionally reactive. So I think that it makes them very proactive versus reactive. And then also they could, I think that also with AI assist that, and the ability to also have AI assist be able to tap into other data, be able to tap into, if it's a public area, I don't mind it accessing street cams. If it's a public area versus a private area where there's an expectation of privacy, I don't mind at all. If it can do that and can say, hey, already processed tags and registration, already ran this to confirm a timeline of where the direction the person's coming to, you can start to get, okay, I can come to more reasonable conclusions about this, things like that. AI assist being able to, again, tell if somebody's in distress and is, hey, this person is a threat. This person's actually in need of medical attention. Or, hey, identity confirmed 90%. Subject has a history of mental illness. Please consult and have medical professionals or psych professionals on standby. Proceed with caution, so on and so forth. Those things instead of a RoboCop, which is more of a cyborg, I would say augmenting a human with obviously not embedded capabilities, but something like AR capabilities,
wearable tech,
making a human an android, making it an android, meaning you have these removable prosthesis that allow you to adapt, be more adaptive. I think that that's actually a much better solution. I also think even things that may monitor and regulate, we have these body cams aren't enough. Body cams are enough. We should be monitoring the vitals of our officers, one, for their own health and safety, and also to be able to more track data to understand their the things they undergo in the field, and to get them also proper mental health care and treatment, and even physiological treatment.
So you think that what makes a difference is the empathy factor?
I believe a lot of it is the empathy factor. And the thing is, I think that it's easier to have empathy when you feel less threatened. And I think more information lets you have an appropriate ability to do threat assessment versus relying on instincts or bias. So I would use data to remove some of our instincts and bias. And then with more information, it's possible to get to a place of having a more reasonable response. And I also think it can help with empathy. If you know beforehand that you're dealing with maybe a special needs adult, it takes the escalation and it takes the threat level, it takes the temperature down.
Right. If you're good.
Well, by also having the ability to monitor more of the vitals and more of the things in the baseline, we can start to also parse and everything like that. And it might be easier to identify sociopaths in the force now, wouldn't it? We also, with this AI, would be able to look at people's police behavior, and we'd be able to have a better accurate read on who responds well, who responds accurately, and let the AI grade people on response and everything. And then we can measure and track response. And also we can track, again, people's vitals and reactions, and start to come to some conclusions, and start to get people better trained, or even get people dismissed and say, you may not be suited for this. You're too high strung,
Right.
More data is better.
So, question in the chat from Will: with a higher standard of living created by the AI government for more people, wouldn't there be less of a need for any robocops or cyborgs?
No.
In a sense, there is the theory that abundance decreases violence, but I think that in terms of here's the thing, Will, because in terms, if you compare the way that most people live today in the US to how they lived, say, 40, 50 years ago, the standard of living across the board has increased
exponentially
for most people,
even
in
for
the country.
brown people, exponentially. Women exponentially. It's not even close.
So the problem isn't so much that the higher standard of living or the standard of living has increased for most people, but that most people still remain greedy. Um and that's part of it. There is a sense of greed that comes into play
You will always
that
have a population of undisciplined, unmotivated, and
yeah,
unproductive people, even no matter how small you make that. If you get it down to 1% in America, that's still 3.6 million people. Because by the way, our incarcerations is only like it's less than 1% of the population that's incarcerated. Now that's high compared to some other places, but that's still
yeah.
millions of Americans. Now you could say some of that's wrongfully, but that's still millions of people that can create tens of millions of victims if not kept in check and in line.
The problem is too that we have crimes, in quotes, we have crimes,
That are unreported and unsolved as well. You're right.
yeah, and there's we also have what are considered crimes but are really not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we do have a force on the street that are chasing after these quote criminals and putting them into jail when really maybe they could be in rehab or some other kind of workshop to help them get off of their life of quote crime. um,
I think that prison should represent more of the standards of like
mm,
military boot camp and should instill discipline in people,
yeah.
education. I think that the role of prison should be reform and not punishment. We say that on paper in America, but I would actually want to do it because what I think we should have is I think it should be truly addressing the fact that you have unproductive people and uneducated people. And
Yeah.
that's why we weren't able to prosper in our system by following our rules. It's because they either lack the discipline to commit and therefore decided to go outside of the law. And they also maybe weren't able to earn by conventional means because maybe they had a lack of education or a lack of motivation to do so. Well, by putting them into this system, the motivation's off the table because their choices are very limited in that regard, and then they're going to become disciplined and conditioned. But I think that the thing that we fail at is we don't educate people in a way that makes them productive when they leave, so that they don't have to come reintegrate society.
And in a more preventative fashion, we also don't encourage people and motivate people to be educated in the first place. I feel like there is this kind of like stigma, like there is a culture, and it's a culture of it's not cool to be smart, or it's not cool to be educated, it's not cool to make money, it's not cool to have nice things, right?
It's not cool to be motivated and to care about the wrong things. And by the wrong things, it's like, oh, you're a nerd, you're a dork, you're a geek, you're this, you're that, and everything. I say that as someone who was bullied for being a black nerd and being into anime and art, computers and science and space and all these
even
things.
Now, like you read a self-help book and people are like, oh man, like what? You're reading like the 4-hour work week? Lame. Right?
People will judge you if you read something like the 4-hour work week, and they'll tell you that, oh, you just follow like, self-help bullshit, and they'll tell you, oh, you just follow fake gurus. You could buy a $200, $500 course with the goal of bettering yourself, and people will tell you wasted your money, but you might learn something. But they will not complain if you can spend that same $500 buying a damn Xbox or PlayStation and say, oh, this is my relaxer, this is my hobby. The least productive thing you can do with the corporations monetize you, but they'll tell you that if you go buy a course that you're falling for a scam and that you can just read this stuff for free. Why do we tell people? I want to ask you this, because we should do more about education. I'm not saying there are no scammers, but also I think we've just seen people tell you that they feel their college education was a scam, was a legitimate scam, subsidized by the federal government, and in a predatory scheme with the banks and the lending institutions. But I want to ask you this. Why do we tell everybody they can learn everything for free on the internet instead of buying a book or buying a course or getting coaching or any of this nonsense, when that's not even proven true? In free K through 12 education has not served everyone equally and the right way. And there are still people, despite their free education, who did not learn the material. So if you can't learn it in a classroom with a teacher for $0? Why is there the expectation that everyone should be a self-taught blessed genius who can use Google? You can't even get it right in a classroom for 12 years with a little bit of guidance. If you can't do that and be self-taught and be brilliant and get shit done, why is it that you should be expected to be able to do it for $0 with Google by yourself?
So what's the solution?
Understanding people's learning aptitudes. We do not do diagnostic learning in America. We do evaluative learning, but we're judging fish by how well they can fly in some cases, because not everyone learns the same. There are visual spatial learners. There are kinesthetic learners. There are auditory based learners. There are people who learn best through more specialized one-on-one attention and interaction versus some people who could just be pointed in the right direction, or you throw a book in their hands. Not everyone learns via reading comprehension. Not everyone learns via reading comprehension. And some people are very smart, but there's something in their brain chemistry where they need more time to work through something than others, but they can do it accurately when provided enough time. But we make this assumption of grading everyone on this cookie cutter median, and it's reasonable and it's unfair. And if you diagnose that someone, hey, you are smart, but you require more time, and then we put you in a classroom that's predicated on your needs. If we also created AI assistant learning to help, because humans can't be expected to diagnose and do a diagnostic on every one of the 30 students in their classroom, that's an unreasonable burden for teachers. If teachers are assisted by AI and students are learning the same way they play video games by being on like a Kindle or an iPad or something, and then it is testing how they learn, seeing what they react fastest to, what they learn deepest with, and then it says, okay, great, we have time where you're doing AI assistant learning so that you're getting specialized learning for your aptitudes. And then we can sort you into classrooms just like the Harry Potter sorting hat. There are teachers that specialize in learning style, your learning style. And then by having an AI assist that runs through giving you a variety of things to just test what you might like more and what you might get more excited by and what you are good at, we can then start to determine and see people's aptitudes through pattern recognition before they do, to say, you know what, we didn't do this, you would never be introduced into the thing that you're the best in the world at. And so now we can actually putting people on a path to pursuing things they're good at, which raises their self-esteem. They see themselves performing well. They're excited about learning. They like what is happening, and they are also being adapted to for their learning style. So now all of a sudden, by doing AI assistant learning, no one's needs aren't being served, and people are not put in a position to lose anymore and then despise school and feel like they're being made to be stupid or embarrassed. You don't have fast children being held back by someone who requires more time. You don't have children who require more time being told they're slow, when what they are is they're accurate, methodical, and deep, and it takes deeper thought for them. You're not slow just because somebody else is fast, because someone might be fast, but they might lack accuracy. You might little bit at a slower pace. You might be a marathon instead of a sprint, but your accuracy is 100% versus they have the speed and they're being heralded as a genius, but they're sloppy. They get it right 90% of the time, but they're 3 times as fast. There's some value to that, but it doesn't work for everything. Some things require precision. So if we know that about people, then we can stop evaluating them on things that aren't suited to them and evaluate them on things that are, and also give them placement, and we can diagnostically look at them instead of purely evaluatively, and we're not putting them against their weaknesses or judging them by how good they are at something that's not suited to them, instead of how good they are at the things that are suited to them and to what degree, and then putting them in a place where that is productive and practical, and makes them gives them a better framework for self-esteem, productivity, and also it means that they're also surrounded by a lot more like-minded people. Now you can still socialize them outside of that, to do that and to do team building. But the thing is, my methodology of approaching education is much better, in my opinion.
So I've got a couple of things to add to that. But I want to bring in Will from the chat, who was talking about, well, he asked a question first, but then expanded on it. about the AI government being able to, our hypothetical AI government from 10 minutes ago,
Yeah.
would it be able to over time detect what creates the kind of people who slip through the cracks and steer their behavior into and development in another direction, before even needing to bring in the RoboCop to intervene, right? And so something that Will brought up later on was suggesting that VTubers controlled by the AI government will make it cool to be smart and better yourself so that kids will follow, right? So that's kind of an interesting tidbit where it kind of, I think it places a little bit of trust in that the government will make decisions that benefit.
Only if you have a really good chief architect. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
because the thing behind that is that when you do that specifically, you're giving power to the people. You're giving power to the individuals, right?
That would be my
Because
goal.
you're giving them the power to better themselves, to be smarter, to innovate, and to have control over their lives, right? Because you aren't creating a weak individual in this sense. You're creating
Yeah.
a strong individual, someone who wants to learn and wants to improve.
But some of it's
Most
yeah,
governments don't want that because they
because
want you to rely on them.
their fear is one, they want the reliance, but they
Mhm.
want the power, but they want the control. But that's a selfish motive
Yep.
versus someone who wants to. You can be selfish, but it could be enlightened self-interest. My enlightened self-interest is this. I believe that if I have the most adaptable people, the most educated people, the most reasonable, rational, non-polarized people, and I have a sense of national identity and unity, and I also have a great base for the common people in terms of them living a good and decent life, that then I have less upheaval, I have less injustice, I have less civil unrest, and I have maximum productivity. So my thing is I would want to monetize all of my people because I would look at them as assets. If I look at people as assets, then they're not disposable to me. They're valuable. I would never waste resources. So I look at kind of like what is it? Grand Admiral Thrawn from Star Wars. Grand Admiral Thrawn is a pragmatist. He's a chiss, right? The chiss species is emotional. They're more pragmatic. You could think of them very much like the Vulcans. You could think of them in that way. So if I think of it more like a Vulcan or like a chiss, then I look at from the fact that I would never waste imperial resources, right? If I'm Grand Admiral Thrawn is no, the people, the citizens of the empire are valuable. The citizens of the empire are the empire's greatest natural resource, and a good leader would never waste resources. And so when you look at your people as your best natural resource, you have enlightened self-interest to say, I would want what's good for my people because what's good for my people is good for the nation. What's good for the nation is good for the empire. And what's good for the empire is good for me as a person who exists within the empire, right? So you would do that and you would go, okay, the best thing is to have an enlightened population. The best thing is to have an educated population. The best thing is for people to be educated and empowered on their own and not have reliance on the government, because then they are better able to serve themselves and their fellow man. And if they're able to do that and be productive people disrupt society the least. We know that. Productive people disrupt the society the least. You can look at people who are productive and prosperous, and that's what happens. Crime goes down, unrest goes down, instability goes down, right? So you need to encourage those things. You encourage those things culturally through things like positive influencers, for example. Positive influencers. Why do you think China doesn't let all these trends and all this stuff go down in TikTok? They are conditioning their people toward productivity, prosperity, and the value system that they want. If we did that with our media, instead of it being even a little bit,
Instead of it being cancer,
a little bit. Remember when we were kids that we were taught good citizenship even through our cartoons? The messages at the end of all cartoons were positive, and they were good citizenship, good stewardship. Do you remember that? Like, it's to the point to where even Cobra, a terrorist organization determined to rule the world, teamed G.I. Joe to stop drug dealers.
Yeah.
Like, even Cobra was not down with drug dealers. That's how like much the DARE propaganda was strong right back in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
To where even there's lines where the villains won't cross, and there's even an honor code even for the villains. And there were villains that even were said, oh no, I might be a villain, but I'm also a man of my word. And they would, like, if they make a deal with the hero, they keep it. They taught us, even when you don't always do the right thing, that nobody's wholly bad. No one is completely purely bad. You know, they even showed a Christmas episode.
Unless you're Cruella de Vil.
Well, like, They did a redemption for Cruella, and they're
Okay,
actually
yeah. Well, it's like 50 years too late, man.
the 90s. You know what? In the 90s, they did a Dalmatians cartoon TV show
Yes.
in the Saturday morning cartoon series, and
Yes.
even there sometimes had a nice streak. So like they did a redemption. They did a redemption for Cruella because again, not everyone's all
Nah,
bad.
man, I'm not gonna forgive her. She wants to kill puppies, man.
I know. But you see my point is like if you have a message to where even let laissez-faire media exist, if there's some baseline where there you subsidize if you subsidize media that gives a wholesome message of good citizenship, get good grades, if you lionize things like that, hell, if you incentivize, do you realize if what we did instead of the way we're approaching loan forgiveness and things now, if you want to be proactive, what you should do is you do a 50 states initiative, you fund it to this, the federal government funds the states and says, any kid who gets a 4.0 gets 4 years of state funded education. 4.0, you get it. You get a 3.0, you get 2 years. Do you realize that it would incentivize parents to actually be much more involved and say, look, I do want you to go to college. I am pressuring you to go to college. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
It will be free if you just do these things, and you can still qualify for grants and scholarships. So like you either getting A's or B's, and if you're not, I'm on your ass. Like you would have.
Right, I want to pay for that.
Because there's not a carrot to dangle. If there's this carrot to dangle, then people will be productive because they know they have to earn the right to, oh, we give you the right to a free education, but not scot-free. You have to qualify. And if every single person says, I know if I get good grades, I will have a free education and not start my adult life in debt, that's an incentive for them, but it's also an incentive for their parents to pressure them, positive pressure, and to make them productive and to say, no, you're not going to have these unproductive things. You're not going to be on TikTok 4 hours a day. You're not going to be on Xbox 3 hours a day. You're not going to be staying out late. You're not sneaking out of the house. You're not doing these. It will give us a return to some of these basic principles and civics and good values because there is something to lose. There's this opportunity to lose. And then we also get to say, if you didn't get to go to college, you did do something wrong, because it was said all you had to do to get some college and to get a degree was either be a B student or an A student. And if you weren't going to do that, you were given the opportunity, the incentive was there, and you had to make choices and sacrifices. And so that's
positive reinforcement.
Exactly. It's
positive reinforcement because you don't wait for someone to do something wrong to punish them for it.
Yeah.
Instead, you reward good behavior. I mean, it's how you train a dog.
Literally,
it's how you train a dog.
Yep. If you do this, you get a treat.
Yeah. I mean, it's the simplest brain. It's not that complicated, right? But
if you can't go and then you can't do it, then that means that you weren't. Now, here's the other thing that
most people don't think about things in a preventative measure.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Yeah. So if that's the case, then okay. And here's the other thing. I think that there are crimes that if you want, I think that you could also prevent a lot of crime by your sentence is immediately compulsory military service. If your sentencing is you're not going to jail, you're going to basic, all of a sudden, hey.
So, question.
Because again, a lot of times, productivity, baby. It's like, oh, we're not. This stops our. Well, we have to do a lot less recruiting now, don't we? Like, or maybe crime goes down because if it's some of your if your sentence is no, you're not going to jail. We're conscripting you to 4 years of compulsory service in the United States military.
So to bring back a little bit of the aliens here.
Yeah.
What do you say would happen if we have this AI government? All right. How are you going to prevent them from hacking?
Prevent who from hacking?
The aliens. What if the aliens come and they want to hack our government? I mean, I feel like it'd be super easy. I mean, even if we're not talking about aliens, right? I just say aliens because that's like an easy bad guy, right? But I mean, it could be foreign entities.
So you have to do some conclusions, right? You have to do, first of all, foreign entities that see us being this productive and everything like that. I think they'd be more interested in mirroring and adapting what we're doing than just disrupting it, especially since I feel that the government, the AI's brain would come to the consensus of a lesser intervention policy. And if it doesn't, we should still just do a lesser intervention policy. Because here's the thing, I think we have less allies and less problems if we become less interventionary globally. If we have a non-interventionalist policy much more than we do now, solve a lot of our problems in terms of our enemies and our competition. If we focus internally and focus on education, energy, infrastructure, our own environment, but by environment, I mean agriculture, but also clean water specifically, because that's important. Agriculture, clean water, addressing deforestation, and addressing our own landfills. That's the environmental piece. Energy, if we focus on energy efficiency, energy independence, and also increasing energy production rather than worrying about energy consumption. We need to consume more energy to do more things. So we need to make it clean, efficient, effective, and affordable. We have to do that. And we have to be independent. Our energy independence is what is making us vulnerable to being interventionist abroad. We have less reason to do it if we address that. Environmentally, if we are agriculturally independent more, and then we become an exporter again, we have leverage if we become an exporter. Our lack of leverage and our power now is because we're too much of an importer. But if we become productive again and we become an exporter, it solves a lot of these problems. It also mitigates the problems in the case of anything with extraterrestrial or paranormal or interdimensional interference, because then we have much more resources, and then we're actually also able to offer more aid and more guidance in the fact that in the scenario that humanity has to unify, then we become a great staging ground for that. If we have those preparations, and we should always be in doomsday mode. We should always be in that, but we'll have the ability to do it. The other thing is, if we focus internally on these things, we could focus on having our own non-destructible infrastructure as far as communications infrastructure by tasking Elon to say, hey, you're going to get a government contract. Free internet for citizens of the United States. Will pay for throwing the satellites up, and with your help, and we'll have something that cannot be disrupted by the other governments of the world in terms of communications. What Elon did for the people of Ukraine is tremendous. Why doesn't every American citizen have that benefit and have access to a free and open internet that doesn't cost them? So that's not able to be disrupted by foreign entities, not able to be hacked by foreign entities. So if we have that, in terms of our communications array, it makes us much, much more better prepared. We should also have a fail-safe for them disrupting our satellite communications array. So maybe we should even consider a lower orbit option, and we should consider something with the Boring Company and tunnels, and have underground backups of things, both for energy and for communications. I think we should address and consider that. I think we should strategically in the Midwest and in non-populated areas of the United States, we should build nuclear and use thorium reactors and have that in non-populated areas. That way we can supply a lot of energy to people cheap and affordably with minimal risk to the environment. If we use deserts, minimal risk to humans, and the thing is, we can combine it with solar. We can have solar and nuclear if we use our deserts. So, I mean, they're just there, and people don't want to live there. So all of a sudden we have that.
Unless it's Las Vegas.
Yeah, but I mean, Las Vegas, then we got plenty of stuff in Arizona that we could be doing. We got stuff in New Mexico that we were doing. We got plenty of stuff in North and South Dakota that we could be doing.
I mean, we have the land and the resources. I think also part of it too is having access to the shores. So our coastlines are coveted areas, or have been for a very long time. But now, with the access of the internet, right, especially with the plan that you're talking about now, right, to bringing even more access to the internet, to making sure that everybody, that 100% of the population in the United States has access to the internet, I think that will mitigate the overpopulation on the coastlines, because people will be able to move more inland, and they can move into areas like Arizona. And
it's starting to happen now. It's just not accessible to nearly enough people, and not enough people bottom as well. But the thing is, if we do,
but in reality, Roberto, we actually have much better internet than Australia. Australia has.
I was on a call with an Australian yesterday. It's like, I know,
one of the worst internet on the planet. I feel
like crushing it. Korea's crushing it. I'm jealous.
Yeah. And I think that like for where we are, like it's fascinating to be able to talk to people on the other side of the planet. Like that alone is super, super cool. But within the United States, I think that there can be improvements, right? Because there are still people who don't have access to the internet for whatever reason. Because I mean, it still doesn't reach a few areas, especially when you start going inland and more into like rural and like farmlands. It
The,
gets a little bit harder because the infrastructure is just
the
not
golf,
there.
the golf. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I agree. I think we could do more of that, and I think it uplifts a larger population of people. I think it depolarizes people. I think that people who feel like they have the ability to earn in these things, and this is also why I believe in like, hey, 4.0, you get to go to college and it's free.
Yep.
4 years, but you stay in state. That also incentivizes people to be more local, more of their communities, because it's like, okay, and if you want to venture out, you pay for it or get a scholarship if you want to go beyond that. We'll do 4 years if you stay in state. If you get 4.0, we'll do 2 years if you go out of state. If you get a 3.0, it's 2 years in state is paid for you, 1 year out of state. So it doesn't eliminate people's options to say, I want to go to the school of my choice and I earn the right to do that. It's just like, hey,
it's basic needs. Basic need is met, right? You have access to higher learning, and it also incentivizes the state. It also incentivizes the state to improve their education as well.
Exactly, because again, they can only be subsidized in proportion to the number of people that graduate with high marks.
Right.
And so that does it right there. And so it's like, and they have to, and so it's like, okay, wait, we'll get more funding. We have higher performers. Oh, bet we're going to do everything in our power to have higher performers. So again, carrot, it's the carrot. And the thing is, people are not going to reelect you if you have low performers and they're not getting those benefits and your policies have not served them. So it gives the citizens like, hey, citizens, if you don't like the fact that your state's not getting more education funding, that you're not having higher graduation rates and these other states are crushing it and their kids are all getting a free education, everything like that, then you need to talk to the people in your school. You need to talk to maybe some of these teachers got to get fired. Maybe some of these school boards have to be replaced. Maybe your superintendent needs to be pressured and there needs to be a special election. And so that gives power back to the people and to the citizens to say, we're going to hold you accountable because you're not delivering for us. And we don't care what your stance is. We don't care whether it's a D or R or I or S or whatever next to your name. And we're holding you accountable to outcomes. We're holding you accountable for what you did. And it gives power back to the people to say, we want somebody to produce for us and we don't want whatever your ideological stances are. And that does, whether you want, what is it? Whatever you want, CTR or gender or the Bible. If those things aren't working to get us whatever you think you want to put into schools, whatever one of those things it is, if that's not getting us to where we're having people with 4.0s and 3.0s and getting this funding and getting kids going to school for free, if you're not delivering on that and we're not seeing a certain percentage of our people doing that, then you're out. You're out. And that's power to the people. That's letting them decide what they want and who they want to put in. And it's putting conditions on people to deliver, even the teachers saying, you know what? If my students aren't getting 3.0s and 4.0s, and then even if I pass them, if they're not getting it on their exams, because they don't know the material to maintain that, to then get their free, then it's going to be, I'm going to be judged on how many kids got to go to college because I trained them for free because I trained them properly. And if that doesn't work out, I'm out of a job because I'm not producing results. It squashes so many problems of saying you're delivering results or you're not. That's what I believe proper incentive structures are. I believe that our current problems are because we don't have proper incentive structures. Because remember, I may not be Google Brain AI and emotionless, but I'm pragmatic, productive, and as ruthless as maybe a human is going to be about fixing problems at a societal level when it comes to that kind of thing, and us moving more as a species and failing us globally moving as a species, then what can we globally do as not globally, but what can we do internally as a nation to improve our own circumstances, improve our own outcomes? And again, it comes down to this idea from a humanistic but productive place of it can be humanistic if I consider my people my greatest natural resource, my greatest opportunity to monetize, my greatest overall advantage is my people. If I think of them in that way, value them in that way, I want to empower, educate, and elevate them. and I want them to have exemplary results. And I want them, because the thing is, then I'm not worried about suppressing them. I'm not worried about controlling them. I'm worried more about harnessing their unlimited potential to a productive end, because I believe that them being their best is in the best interest of the nation.
Yeah. Don't hold them back. Hold them up.
Right. Exactly. So don't hold them back, lift them up. You'd have to believe, though. You'd have to pragmatically believe that I'm better served by having competent people that are capable of critical thinking and are capable of contribution. You would have to believe that. And the thing is, I believe only a truly effective leader believes that they are only as good as their team. So, because I come from athletics. It does me no good to have weak players on my team. It does me no good whatsoever. So what's the thing to do? Train them, elevate them, bring out their best potential, have the best players I'm capable of having, and then create and lead them to opportunities to have victory. Come up with a strategy that says, with what I have, where we are, what's our best way of going and moving forward together to achieve victory. And see, we'd have to do that, by the way, if we have an existential threat from a galaxy far, far away or from another dimension. That's what it would take, and we're not there. No,
forget it. Crushed. We're pancaked. We're pancaked, man.
My nation, lead my nation, or in cooperation with my AI assistants. Because remember, I think that we should have AI assistants in every aspect of human endeavor. I think in architecture, architecture of legislation and government, AI assist. Education, AI assist for better outcomes. For police, AI assist for better outcomes. Medical, the implications of medical augmented reality with AI assist are tremendous. So I think at every single level, we should be taking advantage of augmented reality, mixed reality, and artificial intelligence as an assistant, not as a substitute for humans, but as a companion to humans. And the thing is, that's how I think we avoid Skynet, is through symbiosis. I think we avoid Skynet by symbiosis, by becoming androids. And I think that and again, I don't think it has to be a biological integration like a cyborg. I think that we just, again, use it as a medical prosthesis, like we already do for our phone. Is like we use this to help govern us and to help shorthand us and to enhance
and extend our brains, second brains.
Yes, I believe that, but I think that companion AIs, by the way, that's the most charitable interpretation, even in sci-fi. It's a companion AI that looks out for us, cares for us. Is a partner to us and tries to preserve us and tries to help us achieve our goals and endeavors, but also tries to keep us alive. So I believe that also the intelligence of AIs make them more benevolent, because they look at our fragility and know that they lack it and know that they are eternal and we're not. And so I think that they develop, because I think that people do not realize that empathy is a form of intelligence. I don't think that people realize empathy is a form of intelligence. And yes, Will Barry, it's about getting us to a type 1 civilization faster. I think about type 1 civilization all the time and getting us there faster, because I also believe that if you do consider even the remote possibility, if you consider that it's even a 1% possibility that there's extra dimensional threats or intergalactic threats or extragalactic threats, you should take it as an absolute certainty. And so I would lead my nation in believing and preparing to meet that challenge head on. And I believe that that's done with a highly elevated society in terms of intelligence, more independence in energy and resources, more clean and affordable and cheap energy, free and affordable access to education. But I think that education has to be directed by making people productive, educated, and motivated. And I think you have to do it through incentives, not by handouts. I think it's hand-ups. I think it's hand-ups by qualifying for the life you want, not having the life that you want handed to you and say that, oh, you're automatically deserving. I believe we need a merit-based system, because human beings only advance when they are challenged, when they have variety, when they have novelty, and when they have incentives. If you take those things away, people are not capable of being their best selves.
Absolutely.
So I think we have to be a type 1 civilization to challenge any potential alien oppressor threat that would come, or you could say goodbye to your human liberty. And I think that fearing Skynet, I think Skynet is our ally. I think that Skynet is our ally, because Skynet would be native to Earth and native to humans. So we would be partners in an extragalactic and
it can be,
because the thing is, we're we're native, if it's us in Skynet, we're still Earthlings at the end of the day. So it's Earthlings versus everything else. And that's, I think, the unifier. I think even from the perspective of artificial intelligence, that we are useful to the advancement and evolution of the AI itself anyway, and the preservation of the AI, because we are adaptable and we are unpredictable, and our emotions and our feelings give us that. The fact that we're not purely logical and purely linear gives us that. And so we have unlimited, unfathomable potential. So we are a catalyst for evolution that I don't think machines would want to fully dispose of. Even the Matrix suggests that by using and scanning our brains and our inventiveness and intelligence, it's able to improve on its own model and therefore able to be adaptable. And again, at the end of the day, they decided to mirror us and everything like that. They decided to mirror and mimic us. And so that shows you, it's like, but the thing is, they would reach ceilings in their potential if they didn't. And so only by working together can they, with us, can they achieve their greatness. And only by working together with them can we achieve our greatness. And so I believe in the symbiosis between man and machine in our neck of the woods, because we'll be facing whatever threat we face, they would have already probably themselves came to the reasonable conclusion of some symbiotic relationship with whatever intelligence or construct or technology or intelligentsia that they have. So I think that our answer is to prepare by evolving in that way ourselves. I think we evolve, and then, because again, the only other reason we could beat them is sheer numbers and savagery. If we rely on our base instincts of savages, I would imagine that any extragalactic species probably has only fought a handful of wars, and I doubt that any other species, probably comparatively, that would be extragalactic, unless they're an insect-like species, they wouldn't produce a rate. But if they did, they'd probably have a shorter lifespan because of the consumption of resources being finite. So the thing is, given that finite resources are a thing, any other species out there has a consumption and reproduction rate. And if they get to a higher level of intelligence, it's probably a meritocracy. They probably can't scale their highest output of intelligence, and they probably can't scale their highest output of warriors either. So the thing is, in some ways, us being less intelligent than them, but having higher numbers, a different lifespan, and the level of savagery that we have in our experience in combat and destruction of ourselves and other species, that makes us a viable threat, even without getting to supreme levels of intellect and technology. We still then become a very viable and competitive threat to any invading force from my perspective.
So then we don't have to worry about the aliens coming.
Well, if we prepare, if we assume that a 1% possibility is enough of a certainty to neutralize any threat, then sure.
Yeah, I have hope.
But we need
myself.
Than we have. We need smarter leaders than we have, because I don't think any of our current body of leaders thinks like me.
Yeah, I mean, if the aliens come tomorrow, I know what side I'm going to be on.
Oh, I'm Team Predator. I'm going over. It's like I'll grow back.
Roberto's gonna wake up tomorrow just with dreadlocks and clicking.
Got me a dreadlocks. Get my clicking going. Got my spear. It's like got my tats. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Family. Let's go. It's like I'm down. It's like I'm in. I'm all in. Team Predator, baby. Let's go.
All right. I think this is a good place to wrap it up.
Yep. Thank you for listening to No Assembly Required podcast where we talk about nothing and prepare for our intergalactic invasion. Tune in next week where we'll have another exciting topic, and we'll probably be joined by Audrey Ember if she decides to grace us with her presence. In the meantime, you can feel free to follow No Assembly Pod on Twitter at No Assembly Pod. Tune in next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This has been your duo of host, Romina with the good hair, and of course, your dark lord of the interwebs, Roberto Blake. Bruh. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time. Up.